Welcome, Gabe, on the Me&my Health Art podcast show. How are you today?
Very well, Anthony. Thank you very much for having me. Great to be here.
So great to have you on the show. And please inform the listeners of how you have arrived at what you're doing today.
Yeah, thank you. I just realised I've got an exit sign sticking out of my head, so that's unfortunate. So I actually started my journey, I guess you'd call it, in natural medicine when I was about 15. So a bit of a personal story. So I was very unwell as a kid with an illness, an autoimmune illness called ankylosing spondylitis, which is a juvenile form of arthritis, if you like. So very long story short, not a lot of people could help me. So my dad was a doctor, so I eventually went up to his study and sat down with some of his textbooks as a teenager and started just reading through. And some of the ideas that I came up with at that time, which were a bit weird and wacky, were, okay, what if I got rid of dairy? What if I got rid of wheat? What if I cut back on meat consumption? And remember, this is New Zealand. I was growing up in New Zealand, which is a country famous for dairy and meat, as you know. What if I implemented some strength training? And this is all the stuff that I was getting from his textbooks, both medical textbooks and running textbooks. He was a bit of a runner at that time. Put all of those into practice myself, and then managed to see this sort of gradual recession of symptoms, which people, I guess the medical specialists around me at the time said, oh yeah, it's just, he grew out of it, quote. Because again, there was no such thing as functional medicine, clinical nutrition, integrative medicine, complementary medicine at that time. It was all very much, there was the orthodoxy, and then there was this very distinct divide between the orthodoxy and what we would call now natural medicine practices. So that was probably my first introduction to the industry. And then probably nonsensically went and studied law and commerce, and then started working as a solicitor before moving into private hospitals, and spent a bit of time running cath labs and surgical contracts and so on before eventually finding my way after, I guess probably, which is interesting for the topic we're covering today, a bit of a period of burnout. So I'd done countless years of study, as you do in uni, worked my guts out, got through uni, got a good so-called good job, took myself off to India for the better part of 9 months, where I fell across actually, because I was had a situation down in the south of India where things were coming out of both ends. Nothing was working. I was lying on the floor of the shower trying to feel like a human again after a bad prawn, literally a bad prawn. And the owner of that place where I was staying as a very sort of early 20s young man said, look, I'm going to give you something. It'll give you some relief and see how you go, sort of thing. And what he gave me was an Ayurvedic preparation. And so, again, literally this sort of night and day experience of we've all experienced it, I'm sure, when we've been traveling, on the floor of the shower, just trying to run the cold shower to give myself some feeling of relief, like literally feeling like death, to the next morning, up and at 'em, back out, enjoying what, this incredible, vibrant country that India was at that time and still is. And so I thought, holy crap, there's something here. And so I guess one of my sort of characteristics is this sort of probably very annoying curiosity. So my next protocol was to speak to this guy. I said, look, I need to know more. Where can I find out more about this Ayurveda stuff, Indian medicine stuff? And he said, look, there's a Vaidya, over here who runs Vaidya is the equivalent of an Ayurvedic doctor, if you like. These guys are all degree qualified in India, as you probably know. 7-year program. They cover surgery. It's essentially a medical degree in India. So I went and saw this gentleman at his sort of retreat, had all these different therapies, and again, sort of sat down. This is before the iPad Pro, with my little journal, and kind of said, okay, shit, I've got to figure out, there's got to be an intersection. And I knew nothing, right? I was honestly knew nothing. There's got to be an intersection between me studying this practice, Ayurveda, which I'd obviously just fallen very, very deeply in love with, and somehow bringing what I thought were my amazing commercial skills together. Again, at that age, nothing, and it's probably a good thing, as you know. So anyway, cut a long story short, came back to Australia, did a diploma program in Ayurveda in Sydney and back in India, while working full-time then at Accenture as a strategy consultant. And and you can do that stuff when you're in your 20s, right? You can do a full day of work and then come home and do a full evening study. I can't do it now. And then my teacher actually said, "Hey, well, I'm working with these guys who sell raw materials to the likes of Blackmores and so on. Would you like to meet them?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" These guys offered me a job, and then I sort of made my way through the industry from there. But Tony, I've been fortunate enough to both run brands, do product development. I've worked with, I was an exec at Blackmores for 11 years. My love and passion for what I call natural medicine has taken me, to do product development out of Singapore for 14 Asian countries. It's taken me for 3 years to China to work in manufacturing and ingredients over there as well. And as we were saying before we started the call, in 2019, without any sort of pre-warning of COVID hitting, made the decision to come back from Asia and say, okay, I'm now in my early 40s. Now this is the time. If I know enough, I've got enough contacts, I've got enough knowledge, at least in principle. Am I willing to back myself? Mortgages aside, kids aside, to have a crack at this. So, which I guess brings us very neatly to this conversation.
Absolutely. Incredible backstory. I really, really warmed to it because it's, was, similar to what I experienced growing up, poor health. And then it's driven my massive desire to want good health and then to help others find their health or, discover better health. So, we have very similar backstories and, really,
and I think,
thanks for sharing.
I don't know you well enough yet, but I think you're a little bit like me in terms of, it's almost like do as I do, not as I say. I'm a big believer in you've got to live the ideology, you've got to live the principles, I think, and I get that sense about you as well. So, you almost want people to be able to see the way you live your life, carry out your day, even with all the stress of jobs and kids and mortgages and stuff, as a representation of the principles that you're teaching, if you like. Because I think if there's that disconnect, people are very savvy. And Australians in particular have a very strong BS filter. So I don't know. I think you've got to be able to walk the talk, I reckon.
100%. And Gabe, let's rip into our topic for today, and it's cognitive overload and its impact on health. Now, you mentioned in your your background that obviously you're burning the wick at both ends through your 20s, and you've realised now that you just can't get away with that these days. No. So, what is the fundamentals of avoiding this sort of burnout, and what do you do to help yourself today so that you can continue to perform at your best?
Yeah, no, it's an awesome topic, and I think it's something excuse the pun, it's something I think we all think about a lot, right? So there's this polarity, as you know, between what we would love to accomplish for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, for our businesses, the number of hours in the day, and the sacrifices and compromises we're willing to make in terms of sleep, nutrition, busyness and so on. And then these practices around psychology and how our brain and our cognition work in terms of what is the actual load that we can handle with and without support, right? And I'll explain what I mean by that. So we're all familiar with genetics, epigenetics now. I think that, the popular press is covering it to the extent we're all kind of across it. So I think there is an individualized capacity in terms of what people can and can't handle from a cognitive load and a cognitive stress point of view. And you would see this in practice, I'm sure. We've all got friends or family members who they just can't handle stress, right? Quote, the smallest thing, whether it's juggling the checkbook or, being late for whatever, that sets them off and they're into a spiral. There are many practices, and I'll start with practices versus, say, products. There are many practices that can help those type of people, raise what I would call their stress threshold, if you like, or their cognitive threshold in terms of what they can and can't handle. There are other people at the other end of the spectrum who, they've got 3 kids and 4 businesses and, investment properties and, they're traveling around the world. These are the high performing people who just seem to have a capacity beyond mere mortals, right? So you've got both ends of that spectrum. both of those, and everyone in the middle, of course, both of those types of people are still subject to, as we've discussed, cognitive overload. Now, let's define cognitive overload a little bit more. So this is the idea that almost, when you've got, as I have right now, you've got 400 windows open on your laptop, you've got Outlook running, you've got PowerPoint running, you've got, you've got 0 invoices up on the screen behind that one, and you might have a podcast running in the background, right? This is exact. So the way we think about it, and as you know, when that happens, your computer slows down. In a lot of cases, it even crashes, right? And we know that it's just not the ideal way to run that hardware and that software. The same exact thing applies to our brains. So we've all heard of the switching cost of changing between tasks. So and again, I'm guilty of it as well as anyone else. This idea of attempting to multitask, this idea of, can I just stuff in one more call into the day? Can I stuff in one more meeting at the end of the day? All of this is contributing to cognitive overload. But I think what's unique about society in 2022 is we finish a full day of work, and in my opinion, we're all now cognitive athletes, right? So there's not that many of us, and even those of us who work in the trades, there's still a big cognitive component, whether it's invoicing, bill paying, administration, all the rest of it at the end of the day. So we do all of that, and then we come home, and guess how we relax? We're sitting in front of this incredibly stimulating slot machine called our mobile phones, where we're going through, as we were saying before the call, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, listening to a podcast, catching up on the news, whatever it is. And in many cases, we've not got one screen, we've got 2 screens, we've got the television going as well, right? So, and that's our relaxation, which when you take a big step back, it just boggles the mind, right? And I think actually, I think it's probably fair to say that mums in particular have it worse than any of us, because they've got the context of the entire family's health and well-being. Not that dads don't, but I think mums do more than dads. The entire family's health and well-being in mind all the time, plus their job, plus their responsibilities at home, whatever it is. So, you can feel overloaded just talking about it. So that's cognitive overload. So what does it do to us? So there's this background level of stress, right? So there's psychological research that shows that there are some individuals who have a fight or flight response, a spike of adrenaline, a spike of cortisol when their phone rings, right? And what's happening there? It's like the phone is not a threat, but that individual is so overloaded, so primed for, oh my God, what's this going to be all about, that her receiving a phone call is actually part of her fight response. So, and this is, I mean, you're nodding and smiling because I think, this is a lot of your patients, I'm sure, right?
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. So many, and you touched on it before too, is that's mum, that busy mum with so many responsibilities, a career, and just, low energy because they're just going nonstop. And at night they're doing all the administrative stuff that they couldn't do at work, and, keeping, I guess booking Johnny in it, swimming, and so it's I could totally relate to what you say, because I do hear it on a daily basis.
You would, and we hear it all the time as well in the supplement context. It's like, God, do you have anything for this? Do you have anything for that? And it's this confluence of factors around, the impact of stress on the immune system, the impact of stress on the adrenals, the impact of prolonged stress on libido and energy. So you've got all of these quality of life factors that are impacted by this overload, right? So anyway, I think we've diagnosed the problem satisfactorily. It is a direct consequence of our way of living, right? That's if you want to oversimplify it, that's what it is. So what the hell can we do about it? So number one, I think it's unrealistic for you and I to say to our patients or our customers or whoever it is, or our friends, quit your job, move to, as my parents did, move to the country in New Zealand and everything's going to be better. It's not. Like that's just, these days it's not realistic. But I think what we can do, and I philosophically, I generally start with principles and practices before talking about products. Right? I think products are the icing on the cake of nutrition lifestyle practices, if you like. So what we can do is be pragmatic about scheduling. So I think that's a really, really critical point. So I use an app actually. I lean on an app called Sunsama. So Sunsama basically says, look, these are the hours that you're willing to work. Because again, in my 40s now, as we said earlier, I honestly can't get away with the 9 p.m., 10 p.m. night. Some of my friends can, but I can't. Like if I want to stay healthy, useful to my team, to my customers, to myself, to my family, I can't be up at those hours working because my sleep's disrupted, my energy levels the following day. Like I wish I was 22, but I'm just not. So I can't do it. So the first thing is take back control of your schedule. And I think in particular, if you are working on X number of tasks, you can't put those tasks on a list unless you allocate specific amount of realistic and conservative amounts of time to completion of those tasks. Right. So I got a reputation when I was living in Singapore among my mates for being the guy who was always running late. And it's not because I'm not disciplined. It's not because I'm not focused. It's because I thought I could get away with more in the schedule than I could. And I think, it feels like that's such a common thing for people. And I think when you apply that, okay, task plus 20% buffer to your scheduling of stuff on your calendar, then you and you'd know this with scheduling patients, I'm sure you always allow a bit of time beforehand and a bit of time afterwards, right? To kind of, see them out the door, assimilate what they've told you, write up the case, whatever it is that takes that bit of admin time.
Absolutely.
I think we're all guilty of underestimating that stuff. And I think there's a great book by a guy called Greg McKeown, who I'm sure you may have read or come across. It's called Essentialism. So essentialism is it's actually not about, it's about choicefulness. So it's about not saying, I can get 8 things done today. It's saying, okay, what are my top 3? What are my top 4? And getting those on the calendar, and then having a level of self-awareness and acceptance to say, okay, that's all I can do. If my constraints are I need to be in bed by 9 or 9:30, and I need to stop using screens to get a proper sleep 2 hours before that, and I want to sit down with my partner and have a conversation so I keep my relationship alive. There's just some shit you can't squeeze into the day. I mean, that's all there is to it. So that's a practices kind of thing, which I think sounds inane, sounds boring, doesn't sound very sexy, but you've got to get it right, because if you don't get that right, particularly as a hard charging individual, nothing else will work either. So that's point number one. We spoke about, before starting this conversation, this idea of a media detox or a media consumption fast. Look, scrolling Instagram, scrolling TikTok, scrolling Facebook after you finished a whole working day in front of a screen, it's not doing your brain any good. You're putting it, although it may be pleasurable to look at, videos of dogs jumping in pools and stuff, it is still putting a cognitive load on the system, right? And so I'm not asking anyone to become a monk, but you have to think in terms of, okay, again, this principle of essentialism, right? Can I give myself a 30-minute, make up a number, free for all, social media feast, right? Just set a timer, give yourself 30 minutes of whatever you want on social media. Like look at 1,000 cats. I don't care. Like whatever you can squeeze into that 30 minutes, and then turn the apps off. Right. And I know, you've got commutes, you've got all of that kind of stuff. And it's not just, I'm not being rude to social media. I think it's just one symptom, if you like, of the overall thing. So I have tried and failed to delete email and all social media from my phone, just almost adding the friction of forcing myself to go to my computer and actually boot it up and then find the app in the browser. And that helps, to be honest. That did help. But I think, just so that was one thing that I sort of imposed on myself, particularly during COVID, when it was, as you would have experienced as well, incredibly sort of stressful, uncertain, and starting a business during that period of time wasn't a particularly stress-less pursuit. So I also put myself on a news fast as well after a period of time, after a period of months of just kind of, punching in the face of the bad news every day. I was just like, okay, come on. Is me reading this stuff actually helping anyone else, or am I just pushing myself kind of further into a state of despair? And I thought, look, I think I'm just going to read a couple of select publications in my area of interest. As I say, give myself a 30-minute kind of social media feast, and then get off it and just get on with what I'm trying to achieve. So those are, again, just some simple practices. The idea of, we've spoken a lot everywhere about sleep, as I'm sure you have as well. I saw on your list of recent guests. Sleep is when we do our deep cleanse of our brains. So it's when your brain, so we all apparently have 4 or 5 dreams a night, none of which I remember, but I'm sure they're great. But that's the purge of the hard drive. That's the purge of, that's shutting down the windows on your laptop. The quality of sleep, the importance of sleep and the importance of quality of sleep can't be overestimated. So, and again, we've not said a thing about products or supplements, as you know, because I think these are the foundational principles, right? And then I think giving people tools, and I would start again with practices. So I would start with the idea of meditation. So everyone talks about meditation these days, as you know. I'm sure it's come up heaps on your podcast. I cannot overstate the importance of some sort of meditation or mindfulness practice. And it doesn't have to be transcendental meditation. It doesn't have to be, Vipassana meditation. It doesn't even have to be anything linked to any sort of formal structure. There's some great apps like Headspace and Calm where you can do a 10-minute practice. One should consider it the most important gift you give yourself in a day, in addition to a good night's rest and a proper diet, in my opinion. That's probably where I would start. Sorry, I'm rabbiting.
Not at all. I found it very insightful, and I love your analogy. And you're talking about the hard drive of the computer, and when you're running all these certain applications, then it slows down, and essentially, it applies to us. And then how do you clear it all? You get a good night's sleep. So. Yeah, it's and I love how you talked about boundaries. I think that's essential, and the realism too. How you spoke about the essentialism and just your top 3. What are your top 3? Focus on that. All your energies. Yep. Do that really well. Don't worry about the other. Pick it up another day. I mean, you got to be realistic.
Yeah, it is that realisticness, but I think it's also. One of the hardest things for our modern society, right? For big first world problem is, there's so much cool stuff. I don't want to limit myself, quote unquote, right? Great recipe for mediocrity. And I'm telling myself this as much as anyone else, right? Being the jack of all trades is a wonderful recipe to be really average. If one wants to be awesome at something, whether it's raising a child, building a business, excelling in a sport, or being great at chess, whatever it is, being great at video games, you need that. You can't do everything. It doesn't matter how intelligent you are. It doesn't matter how capable you are. You physically can't. And I think one of the biggest realizations of, and I am in middle age, is that physiological capacity starts to shrink somewhat, and you just go. You want more from the body and brain, and it's just and this is where we reach for optimization practices, right, and supplementation and all those kind of things. But there is a limit, right? And I think it's then saying, okay, think of it like a household budget, right? So I've got $100 or $1,000 to spend in a X period. If I spend any more than that, I'm in an overdraft, or I'm using my credit card. And I think this is an interesting analogy for people to think about. So your stress hormones, your adrenals, you can overtax them, absolutely. And the body's an incredible organism, and will let you get away with it. It's a finely tuned Ferrari. It's a finely tuned Lamborghini. It'll let you get away with it, but eventually that debt comes due, right? And are you ready? Are you ready for the sleep debt that you've accumulated? Are you ready for the adrenal fatigue that you've accumulated? Are you ready for, and again, I don't want to be too outspoken about this. We spoke about everyone's capacity for stress, right? There are some people who hit the upper ceiling of their ability to manage stress and then have things like mental illness or anxiety disorders or, chronic fatigue, or all of those kind of things, which are the sort of the unfortunate end result of this prolonged credit card debt of maxing ourselves out every day. So yeah, it's fascinating.
And we're seeing a lot. I mean, I'm certainly seeing a lot of that in clinic, in terms of that people are over capacity and starting to feel the tax burden on their bodies physiologically, in terms of they're now in that fatigue.
You'll see it in the gut, you'll see it in the immune system, you'll see it in energy systems and all the rest of it. And I think, and this is the double-edged sword of supplementation and nutritional hacking, is you and I can give these people tools to give them that little bit of payback on that debt and get them out of the hole, which I think is obviously, that's our jobs, right? So, but it all will come eventually back to bite them again when they don't change practices, or they don't think through those practices. So yeah, I guess, how do you manage that? So I'm guessing you're digging people out of these holes every day nutritionally, right?
Absolutely. And so when I look at the diets, I can see potentially nutritional deficiencies coming up, and I'm thinking, you're expecting this from the body, but this is what you're fueling it with. And so there's that gap, and
putting diesel in the finely tuned Lamborghini.
Absolutely. And so it does get onto your point around, products and supplementation to help fulfill that gap whilst they embed these better practices or lifestyle habits, because they can't do everything all at once, because that is a cognitive overload as well. If like what we've shared, they're going to think, oh, that's just too much, too overwhelming. Do all that.
And normal people, quite rightly, would go, holy crap, there's no, have you seen my schedule, mate? There's no way I can't meditate. I barely have enough time to go to the bathroom before the kids ask me for breakfast. And that is absolutely right. That is a reality. And my teacher always used to say, if you can change 5%, 3% towards this more balanced kind of structured approach to living, that's huge progress for a lot of people. So people, that's a really good point, actually. Don't, anyone listening to this or watching this, please don't consider that you have to go out there and do a wholesale change on the spot. You absolutely don't.
And so what can they do whilst they make some tweaks to their lifestyle and, start this prioritization, and what can they do around getting the right products to really help support their body so that they've got the energy to keep going? Because as you know, those responsibilities don't go away. The kids just don't disappear, or you certainly don't want them to disappear. You still got responsibility to look after your kids. You still have that mortgage to pay. You still got your obligations to your employer. So what are some of the products that can really assist, with them, I guess running the way they are?
And that's what everyone wants to know, right? So I think for me, there's probably a baseline protocol, and then there's the optimized protocol, right? So the baseline protocol that every single one of us, you and I included, should be getting between 1 and 3 grams of high quality fatty acids, probably from a fish or algal source every day. So our brain is 50 to 60% fat. We need those high quality fatty acids in our diet. And unfortunately, myself included, no one eats enough high quality, low heavy metal, low mercury fish to get the fatty acids we need. Now, if you're plant-based or you plant preference, there are some amazing algal quality fatty acids now. There's a big algal source fatty acids out there on the market now that are a little bit more expensive, but not massively so. So it's getting, first and foremost, fatty acids is plank number one, if you like. I would add to that, and I know you probably counsel this with all of your clients, try and trend towards that Mediterranean style diet. So, or the Aussie Mediterranean style diet. And, again, sorry to labor the simple stuff, but it's lots of olive oil. It's predominantly vegetables intake, meat as a condiment versus meat as the primary source of fuel and energy, minimize high glycemic carbs, fast burning carbs, try and minimize sugar. I think you get that right, you're setting yourself up pretty well. I would add to that, for most people, particularly people in their 40s and beyond, some form of B vitamins. So ideally a bioavailable form of B vitamins, and we can talk about that in a bit more detail. But so don't walk into the supermarket and buy the cheapest B vitamin complex you can find. You're probably not doing yourselves any favors. I think if you can speak to Anthony, speak to a naturopath, speak to maybe someone in a health food store or pharmacy, is there a high quality B vitamin? Maybe it's something that you and the whole family take, that you can get on board with. Again, adding to the family budget, but again, something that I would really, really want people to look at is magnesium. Nervous system supports works across probably 120 different processes around the body, supports gut function, supports immune function, supports stress management. As we were saying at the top of the call, you want to form like mag citrate, mag bisglycinate, mag orotate, not mag glycerophosphate, not mag oxide. Mag oxide is it's something that's going to give you diarrhea in most cases. So they're not all magnesium. I guess not all supplements and not all magnesiums are created equal. So mag oxide has a very high, what we call elemental magnesium yield. So you get a lot of bang for your buck on the label as the product developer. It's also really cheap. So a lot of our contemporaries in product development love it because they get a big bang for buck on the label and it's cheap as chips. Consumers, when someone's gone from, say, a mag bisglycinate or a citrate form, which is generally fairly gentle on the stomach, well absorbed by the body, lower elemental yield, higher cost, and the brand swaps out for mag oxide because some random guy comes in and decides to save a bit of money on the formula. You see, and I've seen it in health food stores. You see consumers come in and go, "I've been taking this for years, and suddenly I'm just getting diarrhea from it, and it tastes weird," and you go, "Yeah, they've changed to mag oxide," and you kind of don't say anything, but so it's just something to be aware of. And then, for bonus points, something around the adaptogen space, assuming there's nothing terribly wrong with you and you are just managing cognitive overload and stress, something around the adaptogen space. So what are adaptogens? Adaptogens are tonic herbs, things like ashwagandha, Withania somnifera, which is one of the sort of core herbs in Ayurveda, which has been used for 5,000 years traditionally to support stress, hormone balance, energy, libido, etc. But now has this increasing body of primary, gold standard clinical research, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials on raw materials out there now, which are available pretty much everywhere across different products. Your ginsengs and so on are also incredible in that space. Your reishi mushrooms, your cordyceps. Again, I think people are really now getting more and more familiar with these ingredients. And then from a nutrition point of view, I'm an incredible fan of high L-theanine content green tea. So a really, really good quality Chinese or Japanese green tea generally has an amino acid in there called L-theanine. L-theanine is this balanced sense of well-being plus alertness. So green tea classically is lower caffeine than your espresso shot, and also has these wonderful sort of nourishing qualities around focused attention, anxiolytic effect in terms of reducing anxiety and stress as well. So, we're scratching this, really, really scratching the surface, but there's so many great ingredients. But that would be, I would say that's a really good base protocol. And then, people who are interested can build on that as they go. But none of that stuff's super expensive. None of that stuff's going to break the bank balance. It's something you can quite safely give, to yourself, to hubby, to your teenagers, and share that stuff across the family. That's definitely where I would start. And to be honest, as I've gone along with access to just about every supplement on the planet, I take less and less and less now. So it's almost that sort of first principles approach of, okay, I'm this age, I have these considerations around lifestyle and health issues or whatever it might be. What's the absolute de minimis approach that I can take? Not even necessarily just to save money, although that is a consideration. It's more just, what does my body actually need? And what does my lifestyle actually require me to take right now to manage the load that I'm hopefully choosing to take on? And what are these incredible natural ingredients and products that I can support myself with? That's my personal process. It's not kind of like, I just want to be smarter, or I just want massive amounts of energy. That's I'm probably like you. I'm a little bit past that phase. I just want to, I want a great night's sleep. I want plenty of energy during the day. I want to make sure that my brain has all the fatty acids that it needs to kind of get going. I want to manage my gut health and nervous system health with really good quality magnesium. And someone asked me the other day on another panel, actually, oh yeah, it's all great for you to say that, but do we really need supplements? And I said, no, absolutely not. I said, if our soils were not replete of all the minerals and nutrients and vitamins that we would want to see in our agriculture, then no, be fine. But I said, absolutely no single Australian. If you look at the Australian Population Health Study in 2019, which was all of us, right, as a representative sample of the country, we were deficient in about 10 different nutrients and minerals. And that's all of us, right? It's not just a random sample of very sick people. That's the entire population. So what that would suggest is that, number one, we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables, and even the fruits and vegetables we eat maybe don't have the minerals and vitamins that we perhaps would want them to have. Number two, not all of us have access or can afford, high quality grass-fed meat, or organic meats, or, pasture-raised chicken, or whatever it is, right? So we're just buying whatever we can get our hands on in the local grocery store. And that's without judgment, of course. And then not all of us, fish is, I don't know where it is for you guys, but it's bloody expensive now. So not all of us can afford to eat 3 fish meals a week, and squeeze that into the family budget. So yeah, it's just there, as we said at the outset of the call, there's these practical realities of what we as an organism are optimized to eat or get on board as far as vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, and then what we are actually achieving day in, day out. and we're, that gap. And I think, one key thing that I've forgotten is effective hydration. So again, the brain requires hydration to function appropriately. So does the body. And I think many of us, despite our best efforts, are still not getting enough adequate hydration, mineralized water during the course of any given day, myself included, to be honest. Like I've literally got to force myself to carry a bottle around with me as I go about my day. So I am that guy that turns up to meetings with a drink bottle, just because I know I'll never do it otherwise. I know my weaknesses.
But I love it because you walk the talk.
Totally. I try.
Yeah. It's and you can those principles that you've shared with us today. You're living them. In terms of the company you've formed, and it lives those principles. The people that work for the company are living by these health principles. So it's really really awesome to see, Gabe. And I'd love you to share a little bit more about the company that you've built just recently.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I didn't want to be too self-promotional. So, Aura is the brand that we've built for humans. We've actually built a dog brand as well, which we won't talk about. And the main concept behind the Aura brand is not necessarily just the products, but of course there are products. It's this idea of creating agency. So, for me, that's the most important thing. So, it's the old anachronism, right? So, applied knowledge is power. So I don't want people to go out and become nutritionists or naturopaths or Ayurvedic herbalists or whatever it is, but I want to give people the tools to return to a stage of life where they can take ownership of their health. They can become their own health general manager or CEO, if you like, rather than just outsourcing that responsibility to people like you and I, or less scrupulous people out there who just say, yeah, take my pill, get this result sort of thing, or do this practice and you'll get a miracle cure. I want people to have the ability to discern, okay, based on my own, where I am, as we said earlier, where I'm at in life, my personal goals, my health challenges or not, my cognitive overload, my lifestyle challenges. These are the decisions that I'm making about my health based on high quality information. That was really the first principle, right? So, and then with Aura, I wanted to upend a lot of the things that I've always been told through my career in the supplements industry, which is, you can't have organic ingredients in there, mate. The supply chain's not ready. They're too expensive. You'll never get them into a formula, blah, blah. We've done that. We've got organic ingredients in every single formulation. Increasing numbers of our products are ACO cert, which means they're either greater than 70% organic ingredients or greater than 95% organic ingredients in the product. And again, these are highly therapeutic supplements that do the job on the label. Are formulated to the highest standard in Australia by myself and my team. So that's point one. Point two, we spoke about this, there's this whole challenge with natural medicine, in particular around compliance. So typically natural medicine has a loading phase. So glucosamine, for example, takes up to 6 weeks to get to a loading phase where people start to feel a physiological benefit. There are some things that work faster, thank goodness. But you have to have someone either in the hands of a practitioner or committed in themselves to spending the money on the product, number one, but also consistently day in, day out taking the bloody thing. So often we find, I'm sure you've got the same thing with your friends and family, you go to their kitchen, look in their supplements drawer, which I always do because I find it fascinating, and there's stuff from 1993, 1996 in there, and you're like, dude, throw this shit out. It's no good. Get rid of it. And they're like, oh, I bought it. It was $50. I didn't want to chuck it out. So, long story short, one of our propositions was, can we make things easier for people around compliance? So, what does that mean practically? It means vegan capsules, no excipients, no binders, no fillers, no more than 2 capsules a day for any of the capsule products. Powders. So I work with a mate of mine who's a baby food technologist to make the powders taste like normal people products. So how a lot of the powders out there, practitioner products or otherwise, they've got that sort of synthetic kind of feel to them. You can't, unless you're really, really sick, you can't stick with it. Even me, I'm a freak, right? But even you ask me to take one of those sort of bright yellow, bright orange powders that taste sickly sweet, I won't do it day in, day out, which is what I need to do to get the benefit of the product, right? So ours tastes, the hormonal balance product, for example, tastes like a chocolate milkshake, genuinely. And people are taking that instead of an afternoon coffee, which is awesome. It's full of adaptogens, it's full of tonic herbs, it's full of reishi mushroom, it's full of, probiotics and prebiotics and so on. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's probably the essence of it. And I think then putting it together in a package that I hope people like the look of, and I think they do, evidence-based formulations know what we call pixie dust in the industry, where you just chuck a bit of an ingredient in there to get it on the label so it looks kind of cool. So just good therapeutic doses of everything in there in a beautiful packaged product that kind of people are proud, I hope, to have on the kitchen bench. And yeah, the feedback from consumers, practitioners, and so on has been really positive. So it's been I think one of the most rewarding things, actually, which I didn't anticipate. 2 things actually. One is the number of qualified health practitioners like yourself who have gotten on board with the brand, and it wasn't an audience that we even really contemplated, to be honest. So that's taking the stuff for themselves and also prescribing for their patients. That's been really fascinating. And then 2. Hearing random people talk about it in health food stores with no interaction with me, and talking about it to their mates, or their customers or whatever. It's just phenomenal. It's super, super rewarding. You must take this, because of XYZ. That's super rewarding.
Fantastic. No, I love it. I love what you've created, and as I said, it represents you really well in terms of your health. Yeah,
that's very kind.
And for the listeners, I'll include the link in the show notes directly to Aura Health's website, so you can go and check out the products. And there's so much information on there, lots of education. So I'll include that link on the show notes and go there, check it out. And
thanks, Tony. And maybe we can give your listeners a special link as well for a discount code.
Oh, fantastic. Awesome. No, thanks so much, Gabe. I wasn't expecting it. So that'd be awesome. No, and the listeners really appreciate it. So so the special discount code, which I wasn't aware of, will be in the show notes. So go and check out the products, and they'll certainly benefit you. They're highest of quality. They taste awesome, and they're working. They're getting results, which is the main thing. That's what we're all looking for with these products. We actually, if we're spending the money, we want to get the results. So well done, Dave.
Honestly, I think people are entitled to no less than that. I think anything less than that is not appropriate.
Absolutely, 100%. And I really appreciate you putting aside the time and sharing all that knowledge from all those years of studying health and implementing health and working out what works and what doesn't work. And there's just fantastic tips that you've really imparted with the listeners. So thank you.
Absolute pleasure. I could bore you with this stuff all day.
We'll have to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Tony. I really, really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you very much for your time too.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks, listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of Me and My Health. Really appreciate your support. So keep providing feedback so we can continue to give you the information that you're seeking to enhance and enlighten your well-being. And if you've really loved today's episode, and I'm sure you have, and you know someone out there that's stressed, that needs a bit of support, please share this episode with them. It's only going to benefit them. So please share the episode. We really want to support more people so that they can live enhanced lives and live optimally. It's all about optimal health these days, not just not sick. So thanks for tuning in.